Alright, so next up we have this Epiphone SG that customers complain about some dead frets and so on. So we're going to have to deal with that. He also has the output jack out of it. It had the original little Epiphone jack, and apparently it just tore out. You can see some indications here of some abuse back here. Anyway, I'm going to replace it with a nice Switchcraft long threaded jack. We'll put lock washers and all that stuff on it. So we're going to do that first. Then we're going to loosen the strings here and move them out of the way. There's only 4 anyway. And look for any hideous high frets. I have a lot of Epiphones come through here that the frets are just loose on or not seated well. I can reseat a lot of them. I won't try to file a fret that's moving around. Then we'll continue on with the fret dress. We're going to get this shaped up too. Well, here we are. Got another one on the neck jig. The frets have been leveled. The ends have been trimmed. We had a little, had some sharp edges on the frets, so I took care of those too. I've got all my tools and implements of fret production here ready. Even had to crack into a new roll of tape. I go through those occasionally. I go through a lot of binding tape. So anyway, you've seen all this before. I'm going to start doing some fret work. Got 22 frets here to profile, polish, and all that. And here we are back on the mandolin. I've trimmed the fret ends, beveled them to match the original frets, leveled them all up. We're ready for the fret dress here. Okay, well, we've got the frets all done. We've oiled the fingerboard. We've taken our tape and everything back off here. Let's string this back up and see how we're doing. Okay, well, that little fret job is done. Man. Anyway, tiny little frets. Actually, they're not any smaller than fender frets. It's just when you're dealing with these little frets on a small neck like this, and you got hands like this, it's like, anyway. So, this one's done. All cleaned up, strung up, new strings. His intonation's been checked. His bridge height's okay. Didn't have to touch the nut. I was careful enough doing the fret job up here to make sure the first fret was the same height as the original one, and went from there, so everything worked out there without even having to refile the nut. So we're all good. We're going to case this up and get on to our last fret job for the time period. Okay. So here we are with our last fret job of the week. This came in with buzzing issues, and this guitar has a funny story behind it. Anyway, let's get with the story first. This guitar has actually survived a house fire. It was brought in for some fret issues and buzzing, and we'll get into that in a few, but let me show you something. It had been cleaned up pretty well. It said the case in this area up here at the top had been hot, and there was some, if you can see here, there's some soot still on the guitar. I've actually cleaned this section right here just to see how it was going to work out. That one little spot had that on it for soot. Anyway, so we're going to clean the rest of the guitar up for him too when we're done here. But anyway, as it turned out, we thought we were going to be able to save this with the fret dress. So I'd already started knocking down the absurdly high frets. Then I ran into something else that's going to be very hard for you to see. If you look here, you'll see the ends of the frets are highly beveled down to the binding. The problem is the string is actually riding on the bevel, especially up here at the first few frets. So what we're going to be doing, I've actually talked to the customer, and we're going to go ahead and do a refret on it. He's probably going to get a nut too, because the nut is actually too close over here as well. But that still won't solve his problem here. You get up here and get looking. Some of these frets, this last one, you can see how far back it's beveled back to here. So we're going to have to deal with that. So it's going to have a refret. So we've got it taped up here, and like I said, started doing the fret dress on it. Like I said, getting preliminary work done so I could actually jig it up, because it was horrible. So here we go. We're going to take the strings off this, get our frets out, and get moving on this refret. Just to show you a little something here, this is the case for the 76 Les Paul. You can see where it's been hot up here. This was a close one. I've also noticed that the headstock overlay is starting to come loose just a little bit on the top of the headstock, so we're going to take care of that too. Well, we have the frets all out. We're in the process of cleaning out the fret slots here. I've also filled in a couple finger tracks right here. If you look right, give a pointer. If you look right here, here, and here, you can actually see where I filled in some finger divots. And we're cleaning the slots out. That's the reason I've got this little clamp on here. Back up so you can see that. It's a little tiny clamp. And I actually use it to support the binding while I saw the slot out. Okay? And while we're here talking about the binding, let's talk about something else. This comes up in here once in a while. I've had to explain this a lot, so let's point this out. If you look close here, you'll see at the end of each fret slot there's a crack in the binding. The reason for that is Gibson and a lot of other people, when they manufacture these guitars, they put the frets in the fingerboard first, then they trim the ends of the frets, and then they glue the binding on it. Well, it leaves a very square end butted up against the binding. And when the fingerboard shrinks, it pushes out on the binding and cracks it at the end of the fret on both sides. That's why you'll see that on a lot of guitars. I actually like to bevel the fret end back so it doesn't do that. But anyway, this is the way that someone builds things. So, okay. I'm going to keep cleaning out fret slots here. Well, we've moved over here to the neck jig. And we've got some problems here. I've marked out the high spots with some chalk. There's a real problem right here. But still, the fingerboard is more level than the frets were to start with. So the problem was in the frets, a lot of it. But like I said, right here was a problem that has to be addressed. And this will be taken care of. So we're going to start sanding on this board and get it leveled up. Like I say a lot of times, the prep work is where all the work is. I refuse to put frets in an uneven fingerboard and mow off extra metal to make them level. So we're going to get this fingerboard trued up and get the frets cut. Something else, I was doing fretwork this week, and this was actually supposed to be one of the first guitars I was doing. But as it turned out, I was out of fret wire. I thought I had more, but when I went to check it, I was a few inches short to do this guitar. And the fenders that I did at the same time with the partial refrets used the same size fret wire. So I started go ahead and doing this guitar and ordered the fret wire. And UPS was right on time. I now have another roll of 104 thousandths, about 46 thousandths jumbo Gibson style fret wire. So we're all ready to go. Well, that came together pretty quick. About a half hour later, we have the fingerboard perfectly leveled. The slots have all been cleaned out and chamfered. Our inlays are polished back up. We're ready to start cutting and fitting frets. We have about another half hour in here at this point. We're off the neck jig and we're over here tapping in, squeezing and clamping frets. So we're up to this point now, and we'll let these set for about an hour, and then I'm going to continue on. Like I say, I use a hybrid method here. A lot of cases I use a zero tension fretting. That's not the case here. I'm actually doing, like I say, a hybrid of a vintage style refret. The frets still fit really well and all that, so they're being tapped in. Then I seat them even better with a fret clamp, and then use blocks and clamp them until the glue is dry. So they will stay in without the glue, but I like the extra protection. Plus it lets you see how well they seat in. So about an hour from now I'll be back. And here I am in the midst of another mess. This is a Squire that someone brought in for their grandson that they had decided to try to file the frets on. And what they ended up doing is filing the fret ends back beveled so far that the string buzzed out because the string rode on the bevel. And not only that, if we look here, there's lots of, look around the frets, there's lots of file marks in the neck. It's really hard to see with this. There. See up here? They not only filed the frets, but they filed the fingerboard and then sides of the neck. We've got big file gouges. We have the fret ends now trimmed and beveled. I've kind of blended everything else back together here. Gotten rid of some of the other problems they created here by filing these fret ends off. I think we've got everything where it'll work here now. So what I'm going to do is do a quick fret dress on this, which is still going to be touchy with this fingerboard that's been beat up. Try not to pull any lacquer. So we've got our fingers crossed with that one. So here we go. So I've been working on the frets on this telly. You can see you've got the fret ends trimmed. I've started the fret dress here. I've made it up to the 14th fret. And while I'm working on this, I just keep seeing all the damage done here up the side of the fingerboard. Man, I really wish you could see this. It seemed to wash out on the camera pretty bad, but it's nasty. It is a shame I can't do anything about this. You see these big gouges here that they put into their file before bringing it in here. Anyway, my job is to make it playable. So I'm going to continue on here with the frets and get this done. Alright, well, we have the other frets in and clamped. So let this set a while. So I've trimmed the ends off all these up here because, well, if you don't, you end up with stuff like that. So anyway, surprisingly, that's the only one I have so far. A day in here is like a day in here without blood is like a day in Florida without sunshine. Anyway, moving on to something else for an hour. And there we go. This one's finished. 5 frets, quick fret dress, neck adjustment, tighten tuning machines, filed the nut right height, did the bridge height, intonation, set the pickup heights. Wow. Still wish you could see this fingerboard. It's a shame it washes it out. Anyway, moving on. All the frets are in. The ends have been trimmed. And we're ready to get back on a neck jig. Had to do a little bit of spot leveling here, a couple little things, very minor issues. Like I say, most of the time when I take one of these out of the clamps, the frets are actually more level than most of the factories are after a fret dress. So that's one of the reasons I go through so much trouble. So we're ready to get back on the neck jig now and get ready to do the rest of the fret work. One of the advantages of the neck jig is I can actually spin this guitar around while it's clamped down and put it in any position I want to work on the edges of the neck along the sides of the fingerboard. Then I can continue on with the other stuff, but it's just the way we do things. And this is what I meant when I said I can put it in any position I want. This is really handy. What I'm going to be doing now is actually going through and taking my X-Acto knife and actually cleaning this little burr out underneath the bottom of the fret end here. You know, actually just be lifting that up out. Then I'm going to seal the end of each fret end with a drop of super glue. When that's cured, I'll file it all back down and make this really smooth right here before we round up the ends. Like I said, a lot of fret work yet to go. We got lots of time to spend here yet. There you go. See how all the fret ends are nice and smooth. No jagged little hunks of metal hanging down. They're all in square and straight. The right way. Oh, there we go. Fret ends are all trimmed, sealed, frets are leveled. We are ready for the real work to start now. So a couple more hours of fret dressing here, profiling, rounding the ends, sanding, polishing, all that. Then we have to make a nut, and we're going to have to do proper setup on it. There'll be a lot of cleanup here too. So anyway, and in the setup we have to actually file notches in the bridge that a local store had replaced for him. So anyway, away we go. We're time to rock and roll. Alrighty, we are off the neck jig. We've got all our fret work done. Look at these beautiful frets. Very smooth on the ends, perfectly leveled and all that. We're ready to start putting this back together. You can see where my fill-ins here have almost disappeared. Once got the board oiled and all that, so let's get on to making a nut. Usually I would do a nylon nut, but this is kind of a traditionalist guy, and he believes in bone. So anyway, we're gonna make him a bone nut. Then we're gonna get this all put back together and cleaned up. All finished up. We have a nice bone nut. We've cleaned the guitar up really well. Got the rest of the soot off of it from everywhere. That's not soot, that's wear. Anyway, so we've got a refret, a new nut, pretty good cleanup. A few little heat repairs here and there. I say he was very lucky with this guitar. But it all came out really pretty well. I even took his tuning machines off and scrubbed up around the rings where all the soot was on those. Anyway, we've got it all taken care of. Plays great. I'm going to let it sit in here for about another week and check it. I am going to go ahead and give him a call today to let him know that it's finished. And he can pick it up next week. So there you go. Like I say, refret, nut, clean up. You know, this guy was lucky. Just a reminder, this guitar was in a house fire. So, there you go. And this is the last guitar, and we'll conclude our Fretwork Frenzy video. This is just to give you again an idea of what can actually go on during a course of a week in an actual working repair shop. So I'm going to soak my hands for the weekend and jump back into it Monday. Got more to do next week. So till next time, play nice,